beyond all of that, I'm a pastor. I took over a class at one of our academies this week, so I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I'll tell you, I just don't do that anymore. So, I apologize for dressing down tonight, but it was a rush to get home and to change and to get here, so here I am. Before I talk to you about the Florida Republican Assemblies, I'd like to tell you how I arrived to where I am tonight, because I think that's important for you to understand that I'm just as patriotic as anyone here. And I'm not a party hack. I'm not a party politician. In fact, if you had asked me a year ago if I ever thought I would be working within the Republican Party, I would have laughed at you. About 3 years ago now, 2 years ago, after Obama was elected, I was so disheartened by so many of my friends who voted for him. And when I say friends, I'm not talking about friends just down the street. I'm talking about Christian friends. Christians that had convictions. Christians that had something inside of them that said this is right and this is wrong. Yet somewhere in the midst of the election, they were able to push away their convictions and say, I'm going to vote for this president. And they actually made excuses for him. And so that really disheartened me. And then I got so mad, and I still get mad. I can't watch the news like most people, because I'll get infuriated, not at what I'm hearing of all the stuff coming out, because we're all used to it. You know, another state taking over something, okay, it's just another part of the battle. What I get infuriated about is the seemingly lack of an ability by the Republican Party to effectively market conservative ideals. It infuriates me to listen to them get up there one more time and just have an A-line. One more one-liner, as if it's 1950. So I wrote a book, No More Secrets. It's in its second edition now. How many of you read the book? I'm just curious. Quite a few of you in here. My goal in doing that was to provide a way for you to get to your friends and family members 30 minutes of information broken down in 5-minute bite sizes at a 6th grade reading level, full color every page, lots of pictures. And the goal was to say, listen, let me show you how the federal government affects us locally. Let me prove to you that Ronald Reagan was correct. Not by just giving you a one-liner, but let me break it down with you section by section by section. So by the time you get through reading it, you won't have a course in economics, but you'll understand specifically when the federal government raises taxes, specifically how it affects the local government. You know, and the teachers union always start arguing about how they need to vote for the Democratic Party because they need to raise taxes to increase revenue to the local school system. Well, what happens when they raise taxes at the federal level? Basically, it reduces cash flow at the local level, right? You reduce cash flow at the local level, you reduce tax revenue at the local level. It's that simple and that black and white. So I wrote the book, and in the process of writing the book, I said, I want to do something else. So I started BooGuide.net, and we just passed my 1-year birthday on it, and I'm so excited. And I'm telling you right now, for the last 90 days, we have ticked off the liberal community. If you go to our website right now, we're getting 50, 60, 80, 100 comments by liberals. Not conservatives, by liberals. And I have to delete half of them because they just don't know how to speak proper English. And I'm not exaggerating. I am a pastor, so I want to try to keep an image of my website. But we had one article that Carmen Reynolds wrote that hit 1 million views. In fact, it was used by the British Parliament and even senators in our own Senate. I wrote an article that went all over the radio talk shows. I tell you, there's nothing like the first time I'm driving home and a friend of mine, Dave Jeffers, who works at the Hobart Air Force Base, calls me, Brian, are you listening to Mark Levin? I said, no. He goes, he's reading your article word for word. Spent 20 minutes on it. I went, really? And then the second time he did it, it's like, oh, that's no big deal. I've already made it, but in that process, I started traveling the state of Florida to give speeches. 100%, well, 99%, I'm not exactly sure of all the groups, but I would say overwhelmingly Tea Party groups, just like here, all over the state of Florida. And from small groups of 12 to 15 people all the way to 600 to 800 in South Florida. In fact, I appreciate Tony so much asking you not to interrupt while we're talking, because I'll give you a story. It's very hard to get through your ideas, but I was at a group, I won't tell you where, and giving a speech about No More Secrets, and this guy kept interrupting me and interrupting me and interrupted me. And I'm trying to be patient and answering his questions. And finally, an old retired drill sergeant, I'm guesstimating by his language, got up and said, "You know we have a guest speaker here, and you're not it?" I had to laugh at that. That was so funny. But he tamed that man down for the rest of the night for me. So how do I get here? In my travels of going to the Tea Party groups, I recognized something needed to occur. Something positive with the Tea Party groups. The passion is here. The passion is overwhelming. The Tea Party people, all of us here, we're the best read people in the country. Period. When you talk to when I went to Tallahassee and they had all the Tea Party leadership come up there in Tallahassee on the first day that they came into office this past spring, and we're sitting there, and I'm listening to the Tea Party people actually educate the state senators and the state representatives on issues, and I'm not exaggerating. And they kept coming back out of session. Now, can you explain this one thing, SB 510 to me again? Can you explain to me exactly what it is? And it was over and over and over again. The politicians, they need our help to be informed. And so, but in the process of traveling, I heard two things. Number one, Brian, are we making a difference? Am I wasting my time? I spoke at a Kiwanis Club not too long ago, and that was a big question. Is it worth my energy? And I tell you, absolutely yes. No one can look in the crystal ball and tell us how the future is going to come out. But I can tell you this, the Democrats would love to have the problem with the Tea Party on their side. Individuals willing to come out on their own free nights, spend their own money, educate themselves by studying the internet, going to the library. When you go to, if you doubt the effectiveness of your movement, our movement, go to Books A Million. 4 or 5 years ago, you would have never seen 4 and 5 rows of books about John Adams, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson. And now they can't write them fast enough. We got authors by the hundreds, and they can't write books fast enough to get them out there to the marketplace because there's so much of a hunger for it. I'm telling you, we have made a difference in the marketplace for this knowledge. There is a renaissance, a revival of people seeking out what liberty really means and what it means for them personally. And I think that's why my book is having the impact in people's lives, is because I took the time. We went through several focus groups. I didn't just write it and say, here you go. We went through focus groups. But we wrote it to show you how it affects you personally. Everything was personalized. And that's what the Tea Party is doing in America. They're personalizing the issues coming out of Washington, D.C. They're showing Americans, hey, this is how it's affecting you. And it may not affect you today, but in 6 months, a year, 3 years from now, it's going to really affect you. And people are starting to see it. So, in traveling the state of Florida, I'm going to stay on topic here. Traveling the state of Florida, I realized one thing that really needed to occur, and that was the ability to add some bite to our bark. And what do I mean about that? When you have a state senator from Milton, I won't mention his name, who has the audacity to tell us the reason why they voted for the immigration issues in Tallahassee was because there were more illegal immigrants there than Tea Party people who showed up in the hallways. And I asked myself, what is it about illegal that I don't understand? Why should I have to show up to Tallahassee? So obviously we don't have enough bite in our bark. We shouldn't have to show up to Tallahassee, period, on an issue like that. Bar none. So having conversations with many people, I say, we need an organization that can do two things. Number one, that can create an umbrella oversight to enhance local Tea Party groups. Enhance, not take over, not take control, enhance. Number two, we need the ability in doing that to allow the local Tea Party groups to maintain their individual identity. So they can keep up with their local issues, their state issues, the things that really make them pop. But we want to enhance that. Number two, we need to create an ability to bring all the 912 people. I hate to say it. It's really strange to me, but we're all fighting for the same life and death issues. Amen?
Yeah.
Yet there's a lot of competition between Tea Party groups and 912 groups and all the other ones out there, and I witnessed it firsthand. I keep put in the middle of these email threads of arguments, and I don't even know who they are. And so in doing this, in traveling, I realized, man, we need to have a way to bring everybody together. The people who are in Tea Parties, the people who are just Republicans, and when I say just, those who are just die-hard Republican Party, conservative independents who will never be a Republican and or a a Tea Party person, but they believe in our values. And then finally, we needed to create a mechanism, a process whereby people who have different interests of involvement can find a way to be involved. Because every one of you that's here tonight, you can multiply yourself times 1,000 people in our county, and they hold your values. But they're not going to come out here tonight. Some of them are 30 years old with 2 or 3 children. They have multiple jobs, or they're looking for a job thanks to Obama. And they're traveling all over the county. They're in the Air Force. They're coming and going. They don't have the time to be here. But if you want them to join up, if you want them to read your email, every Tea Party group I go to, like one in South Florida, it's right south of Sarasota. My mind just went blank. They have about 600 members that show up every month. And I thought, man, that's strong. I mean, it was a huge, when I showed up, and they give $1 too, as to a church. And so they give $600 a week to that church to show up and use the room. And it was huge. And it took place in a church which really, really encouraged my heart to hear and to see that. But that 600-member group, they have almost 12,000 people on their email list that are active. That when they say, hey, we need $10,000, they see it come through PayPal. But those other 10,000 people will never come to a meeting, ever. They have an interest to be involved in some way. And we can't be religious in our approach to the American people and say, well, if they're not going to be here, they're not as patriotic as I am. They didn't come to our special meeting that we put together. Brenda and your group and Boo Guy were all involved. We put together that constitutional conference, and I was just as much disappointed as everybody else was in the turnout. I thought, man, this was such a good idea. But in doing that, I learned a number of things. Number one, people were willing to write some checks to make that happen. They themselves didn't even show up. But they were willing to write big checks. Right, Brenda? Yeah. And so in traveling, I've seen this and heard this. So that was my thought process. How do we bring all this together? An organization needs to be created. Dear God Almighty, please don't let it be me to make it happen. Because I have enough on my plate as it is. And so I was approached by the president of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. Anybody ever heard of that group before? Right. They are so backdoor underground. I never heard of them before either. They started in 1929 as the California Republican Assemblies, CRA. They started because the communists during that time were trying to infiltrate the Republican Party to get people elected, which today we would call a rhino. And so Ronald Reagan himself was a lifelong member. In fact, if you go to NFRA, it's called RepublicanAssemblies.org. If you go there, you'll see Ronald Reagan giving a speech saying, hey, if it wasn't for the CRA, I would have never been elected president. So in 1996, a bunch of people came together and they said, look, CRA has been so successful in maintaining good Republicans when they can actually get them elected in the general primary. We need to take this nationwide. And so they started the NFRA. Some of the people involved would be like Phyllis Schlafly, some of the people that were on staff during Ronald Reagan's administration, and the president today, whose name is Rod Martin. He's one of the founders of PayPal. And so they all came together and they said, we're going to create this organization and we're going to duplicate what's happened in California Republican Assemblies. In Nevada or Arizona, where's John McCain from? Arizona. In Arizona, the Arizona Republican Assemblies have been so successful in taking over the county Republican chairmanships that in the last 4 years they booted out every single one of John McCain's appointees. Every single one.